Welcome to the Lit Podcast, presented by Culturally Lit. Culturally Lit is an organization created to amplify and cultivate awareness of the arts of the African diaspora. The Lit Podcast will feature artists and arts programming that enhance the significance of the culture for everyone. Listen and be enlightened. The Lit Podcast is produced by Baobab Tree Studios. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the LITFest Podcast. I'm IfeMichelle Gardin, founder of Elm City LITFest and Culturally Lit. All things arts and literary of the African diaspora. Today, my guest is Reverend Odell Montgomery Cooper. And she's the founder and president of Interruptions, Disrupting the Silence, IDS LLC. Has a bachelor's degree from Howard and master's from Hartford Seminary. A certified life coach, apprentice, trauma facilitator, and podcaster, where she discusses topics around emotional wellness, resilience, and resiliency. Okay, resilience.
Good morning, Ife. How are you?
Good morning. I'm sorry. I'm going right into it. Good morning.
Yeah, it's like I know you. Thank you for having me here this morning. It's a pleasure to be with you in this space and to be your guest.
I appreciate you coming through. Like, Odell, when I first got the book from you in the summertime, I believe
October.
In October, okay.
Yes.
And I was so honored to get a signed copy, and I started reading it and thought about the journey of people think they're alone in their journeys.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right?
Yes, I did.
And then things happen. But let me get to the beginning. The opening is from Jonathan Berryman, our good friend.
Yes.
Who convinced you to make it art. But to me, the book read like a journal. So how did you enter into beginning to even get this out?
I was never any of my intentions to write a book. I was just as the story says, I was at a cookout, ran into Jonathan Berryman again, very good friend of the family, and he asked me how was I doing? And it's always people ask you that question, but you just like, okay, what answer do you want? Do you want the cliche answer or do you want the truth? And he says, I want the truth. And as I began to tell my story, he says, you have to tell this story in the arts because so many people need to hear it. And I had been told that before, but dismissed it because I was deep in my pain and going through my healing. Mm-hmm. And this time, something Jonathan said resonated with me. And I did not leave the place where we were. I was at Ed Joyner's cookout down the street. And we started making phone calls to make the production happen. And then as we're working on the production, he said, you got to write a book. And I'm like, Jonathan, I could barely read and write to write a book. I'm not an author. This is not what I do. I'm just getting through this playwright. And I had help with putting together a timeline of stories of my life because of the brain aneurysm. I couldn't remember a lot. A lot of my memory was damaged. So I had to literally put together a timeline from birth to date. And then key stories that I wanted to tell. I knew it wasn't a biography. I'm not Oprah. You don't want to know my life. And a lot of people are still alive, so you can't talk about them. So I had help putting together a timeline of what stories I want to tell were interruptions. And that's how the writing began. And it was challenging because I couldn't, some people, as I've been to your LITFest, they sit down and they start writing for hours and they just start typing, and they have the space. And this was not me. I didn't have a practice or what worked best for me. I just did the best that I could and relied on God and didn't realize that I was doing it through the gift of the Holy Spirit, honestly.
You can tell all through it. And Interruptions, the title. How did
Yeah.
that?
That title, as the team was working on the production, I said, well, what do you call it? Like, we don't give it a name. Alita Stanton, Jonathan Berryman, and the director, Reverend Reverend Lisa Anderson, said she's a newbie. She doesn't know how to do this. So the title doesn't come until afterwards. It's inspired. So it comes after you write it and you see it. So, okay. But as I was teaching a class at University of Bridgeport, and I'm trying to teach the students the pursuit of happiness, and I was following behind a professional who was a clinician, a PhD. She was a doctor. I was not. So I'm trying to teach this my way. And then I looked at the class and I said, I want to be able to help you to understand how to get through. And I was looking for the word, and interruption just came out. Yes, how to deal with an interruption when life happens, because you have what it takes to overcome. And that's how the name gave birth to the production. And then when I submitted for my first grant, a grant funder said they were struggling with trying to figure out, what is this? What is she asking money for? What is she doing? And Bill said, she's disrupting the silence. That's what she's doing. He labeled it, and I stuck it on the subtitle, and that's how the name came to be, because that's what I'm doing.
And it's the series of stories that are in here, because even going through it, this like resiliency, of humankind, and also, again, as I repeat myself, as I do, understanding, or having folks around you that help, that are being open to receiving it. Oh my gosh. How has I'm a really speak to in this time, not only the book, but the not only, I'm not saying not only, but the trauma, like so many levels for your whole family, your daughter, your granddaughter,
friends. When my doctor said to reinvent myself, said that, when you introduced me, I have a bachelor's from Howard University, a master's from Hartford Seminary. I have years of professional experience. People who are watching your podcast says, I know her. She was never in the mental health field. She was in the human development field. She was in culinary. I knew her. People still saw me because they knew that where I worked. And are you still there? What are you doing? So yes. So the trauma, the interruptions, and how do you begin to tell the story? When my doctor said reinvent yourself, I knew that I wanted to help others. And how do I help others? And my daughter said, you're not telling this story without me. So I'm like, okay.
She's like, it's part of mine.
Yes. So I had to, and then my son's best friend said, I will include my voice. And then my granddaughter's story of the impact of not even realizing she was in the room, and just hear the impact that trauma had on her vicariously, and how she picked up on the stress of our behaviors and our wordings, and people are here and now they're gone. My son was here and the next day he's gone. Then I have a brain aneurysm. I'm here and then I'm gone. So to her life at the age of 4, what's happening? What's people I love are here, they're gone. Or, where are they? What's going on? So I wanted to make sure that I told the story across generations and gender, because we all deal with it differently. And that was the most important piece to tell. God said, I didn't save you to go watch Andy Griffin every morning and go rent a house in Florida and just sit in the sunshine. You have work to do. And the work that I'm doing this is a new space for me. So I am telling my story, being very transparent, which is very difficult, but transparent and honest to help people to use my story, look at my behaviors, look at what we did that are not uncommon to any other household. But for me, it was very I didn't know what I was going through was going to be this impactful on people's lives. I wanted it to be, but I didn't know that this was what God had planned.
And and I have to say too, there are so many mothers, Black mothers, that have experienced a loss of a child through gun violence, and it they you have to grieve, but you're also the mother,
Yes.
and and you are also a pastor, and
A
as you
reverend, not a pastor.
a reverend. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
um and and taking care of the flock, or
Yes.
putting a flock, and then having to flip it to take care of yourself. How have other mothers of that have been traumatized, because I'm sure somebody has reached out,
Oh, yes.
this book has been some kind of solace for them.
It is. It. We've been having book talks, as we're calling them. Churches have pastors have asked for support because the weight of trauma and the people coming back into the congregations now that their doors are opening, and the weight of trauma and discussion. So our culture, our patterns have been, let's go talk to our pastor, and they can't handle it, and it's not what they went to school for. They're not, that's not, they'll pray for you, but that's not their role, and it's been too heavy for them. So and they're asking for help. So the book talk, the Let's Talk, has been a welcome support for congregations of faith, and not just Christian faith, because people of all faith are going through this. And to have these conversations about trauma and how we're feeling, and not dismiss our feelings. And it was challenging for me because, being a reverend, I had people had expectations of me. What do you mean you're still crying after a month? What do you mean it's a whole year and you're still sad and you're still not having a good day? So people put the burden on me, the expectation of me, to be Reverend Odell, not Mother Odell, and a human. And I dismissed it. It's like, let me grieve. And this grief was very different than any grief that I've ever experienced before. I mean, I've buried both my parents, my grandmother, I have had close friends pass, but what I was feeling was not grief. And I tried to tell people I'm sick, but I didn't have the language to explain what was going on. Well, what's the matter? You got a headache? You got a cold? No, it was something on the inside, Ife, that felt heavy. And I had never felt it before. And it wasn't until I finally decided to seek professional help that my trauma specialist was able to give me the medical language that to attach to my everyday behaviors that was going on, to help me to understand that it was trauma. Not, I'm moody, I'm sometimey, I keep crying, I can't sleep, I'm not. She gave me the medical terminology, and that's what our culture miss. Some people in our culture, that's what we miss, and that's what the interruption story is about. Here's the medical language. We're not sometimey. We're not on that time of the month. We're not moody.
We're not going through menopause.
Nope. We may be going through all those things, but what's really happening to us now is trauma. And trauma has a different impact and effect on us that people don't see.
And again, like, because I have a good friend, Marlene Miller Pratt, who also lost her
Yes.
son years ago to gun violence.
Yes.
And a child losing like that can never go away. And we are now coming, we're our culture, in our African American culture, we're getting better about therapy now, because like, right, like after COVID, people are really trying to
Yes.
work through. But in the past, like, there's so many mothers that like had to keep going, or like there's there's no grief. I guess they have a grief period that people can
Yes.
take time off from work, but that the 2 weeks isn't enough.
No, no, 2 weeks is, and it's not even, well,
What
it's not that. It's cultural. It's
culture?
cultural, it's educational, because another culture, another profession, they don't need the 2 weeks. They got a husband that can say, okay, stay home, baby, I got you. Or you take a leave of absence from your career. I couldn't, that could not happen for me. I could not afford to take a leave of absence. I didn't even know I needed a leave of absence. To me, it was the culture says, my family told me, go back to work, keep going, keep moving, go back to work. You'll be okay. Stay busy. And, one of the things as I talk about with folks is a lot of people at first, when I started having these conversations, Ife, women would be in the room and would be going through a interruption of their own, a divorce, a new baby, a grandchild, their relatives moving in with them during the pandemic, or moving, any type of interruption, good, bad, or indifferent. But they wouldn't listen to me because I heard them say, I didn't lose a son to gun violence, so this doesn't apply to me. That is why I had to shift and to say, let's talk about life interruptions. Let's talk about the fact that we're in a pandemic. Let's talk about the fact that we're alcoholics, we're abused, our children are drug addicts, they're selling drugs on the streets and you can't stop them from selling drugs. Let's talk about
The fact that they went there.
let's talk about the fact that you just got married, you got to change your name, and now you have in-laws and you have stepchildren. Interruptions are not just bad, they're good interruptions, but it causes us a shift. And I know friends, and so do you, who've gotten married at a later age, and now they're stepmothers and the stepmothers to babies, and it's like, this is not what I want. Or they're stepmothers or stepfathers to teenagers who don't like them, and they're providing for them, and you want to come home and disrespect me. So there are interruptions all over. And about church interruptions is when our pastor, who we've had for the last 20 something years, leaves and moves on. Interruption.
Listen, and we are traditionally people who hold it in. That's why
Yes.
when I hear that term, what is it, generational
Trauma. Yes.
trauma coming through, just because I personally, I've experienced an interruption over this past summer with my own child, and becoming some our relationship, affecting our relationship. And in reading some of this, I was like, oh yeah, because I've been in, prior to it, even though in periods of time in my life, I would jump on some therapy,
Yeah.
and not tell anybody, because I don't want nobody to think I'm crazy.
But that's the myth that we have. If we talk to somebody, we're crazy. That's the culture that we've been told. Keep it to yourself. You don't tell anyone. And that's exactly what I was doing until I couldn't do it any longer, Ife, because I was drowning. I was drowning and the pain wasn't going away. And I didn't voluntarily seek a counselor. Someone found her for me, scheduled the appointment, and made the appointment. When I was doing group studies, not group studies, I was doing I was doing groups and trying to figure out how to how to have this conversation. My cousin was in the room and he said, "Who told you to go to counseling?" He said, "I've known you all your life. We don't go to counseling. Who told you that?" Wow. And he's a Black man, but he's telling the truth. Yeah. Who told you to go to counseling? But it was a great question. Mm-hmm. And the white woman that was in the room, she said, "That was me. I told her to go to counseling because I saw the behaviors and she knew that it wasn't grief. She knew it was PTSD." Yes.
Well, one of the things you said, your cousin said, yeah. We don't go to camp. Like, that is so prevalent, yes, amongst us. We go to church and tell pray away. We tell our pastor, who gotta, and then don't realize they or the pastor's wife or whoever, everybody, a deacon, but pastors carry a lot of weight.
Yes, they do.
And people don't realize when they're just that person, sometimes, like you said, they can pray for you, but the capacity sometimes is greater. And I feel like even some pastors don't even realize that.
Yes. Well, they've realized it now since this pandemic, and they're asking for help. So, you talked about the workbook. Yes, the workbook, the Let's Talk, is to have these discussions so that we don't think our pastor is our medical doctor. And they are not. Because still, most churches, most pastors, I can't just say churches, most institutions of faith are saying, pray more. You're not tithing. You don't have enough faith. Something must be wrong. Must be something that you're not doing. Must be some demonic spirit that's over you. Let's just come and we'll put oil on you and heal. You can't. You can't. Some things we've had this conversation are demonic, but I don't go in that space. I don't want to talk about it because that's not my space. But I talk about my lived experience, and my lived experience was not demonic. My lived experience was I needed professional help. I needed a counselor, and I needed to take medication. And my mother clearly told me, you don't take medication. Don't let a doctor give you medication. They'll keep you pumped up on drugs the rest of your life, and you'll just be some guinea pig.
And that generational stuff that yes. we heard, because again, me being transparent, lived with a mother that I didn't realize till I was a mother myself in counseling in my 30s that she lived with depression for a very long time. Yes. And read the Bible, but was very closed and not wanting anyone to know that they were troubled. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe her sisters or somebody, but everybody held it.
Yes.
That's not shared it. And then it manifests within us in so many ways. And just observing that and not coming to an understanding about till I was in my 30s, like generational trauma is real. Like
it's when, disrupting the silence. This is what it's about. We're to not even just to talk about it, and then to ask the question, why do we believe it and where did it come from? And that's what I had to do. Why do I believe this? Who told me this? And I didn't have anything else to do because I'm lying in my bed recovering from a brain aneurysm. And that's all that I could do. And I didn't realize that I don't believe that. No, I can't believe that. So if we have a headache, you take a pill, then 30 minutes, you should feel better. Last night I had a cold. I felt it in my body. I knew what it felt like. I knew that I needed some Alka-Seltzer to help me, get this cold out of my body. We take medication for what we needed, but not for our head and not for our body. Mm-hmm. And trauma, what I had to learn, and I've spent time, and people's like, well, how, again, questioning me, because this is not, I tell people, I'm not a doctor, not a pastor. I am Odell Montgomery Cooper, lived experience, just sharing my story, transparent and honest, with people that look like me. And it's happened in most of our families, most of our culture, regardless of our education, regardless of our profession or our zip code. People tend to think that because it happened to us, they must have lived in the hood. They must have lived in the ghetto. And I had to question, why do I believe this? Where did my grandmother get this from? Well, she must have gotten it from her mother and her father. Oh, they were slaves. Slave mentality. And people don't like that.
Oh no. Oh no. People don't like to, well, first of all, because my issue is people don't even relate to the fact that their ancestors were slaves. It's like that mentality, the way we were brought here and how we were treated for the not just the 400 years, but beyond that. There's the levels of it. It trickles down.
Yeah. Yes, it does. It's, you talk about the diaspora, and that's why I love communicating with you. You know, we have to know our history. We have to know what we're told. And we, as a generation, have the responsibility, have the control of breaking generational trauma, because we don't tell our children about our medical life. My parents never told me about their medical. This is grown folks' business. You know, I'm not going to tell you this. And I had to break the silence. And I tell my daughter medically what's going on with me. And we have a pact. We never lie about our health. Good, bad, or indifferent. I want to know the truth. Talk to me. Don't be afraid to share, because we have to know. And I had to tell her alcoholism is hereditary. And I needed her to know that. And I needed her to know, which I didn't know, that brain aneurysm is hereditary. Trauma is hereditary. I didn't know that.
Wow.
I didn't know that.
Wow.
And so folks are like, well, no, am I professing to be an expert? No. Someone has said, oh, Reverend Odell, you've got to go get your clinical degree. You have to go and have to validate yourself in this space. I can't, because I can't remember.
But Odell, the fact that the you did the book, the play, then the book, and now the workshops, it's an evolution of that.
Yes.
And people are also quick to want to give you the answer for, or get to the answer where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I cared for, which was traumatizing for me, caring for my mother as I see her decline in dementia.
Mm.
I saw it in my grandparents, her parents, right? And assisting with the care of her mother I saw that. So when things started happening with my mother, I say to my brothers, this is happening. Oh, no, no, no. You know, they want to fix it. They want to buy something or do something. And it's not, no, I'm letting you know what's happening.
Yes.
And like, whenever someone in that I know, family or non-family, everybody dies, the first thing I say is, please get some grief counseling, whether you were expecting the death or not.
Yes.
If you were caring for that person, and the evolution of what you've done with Interruptions, and you, like you said, disrupting the silence. And people probably say, disrupting silence.
Yes. Yes. I am disrupting the silence. And, you know, it was difficult getting funding for this, because originally this was going to be a stage play, and it was going to be at Bergamo's, and the pandemic hit and the stage disappeared. And then I had to figure out, how do I do this online? And I didn't know. I had to, Kevin, you know, how do we do this online? Yeah. And I'm having conversation, talking to Rev Kev, and it's like, how do we do this? He says he knew it. He said, you do it like this, like this, like that. But meanwhile, I'm having conversations to promote the online production. And all I could say was, it's going to be virtual. And someone said, what does that mean? I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, I don't know yet. I'm learning. And at my age, at 50, as they say, you can't teach old dogs new tricks. That is not true. I was an old dog and I had to learn new tricks. I had to relearn how to speak, how to write, how to learn everything all over again. I forgot portions of the Bible, but I never forgot my faith. I forgot days and events with my son. Every morning, my daughter and I were still driving. She was in a culinary school. And every morning we're driving to work. And I would say, tell me a story about John, because I forgot. Because the brain aneurysm. And I would still see pictures today. And I'm like, I don't remember. And the difficult part with people is they see me, but they expected me, oh, she's fine. But I wasn't fine. What was going on with me, Faye, was going on the inside. Trauma had exploded, PTSD, anxiety, and, depression. And I'm trying to, I don't know, so someone say, hey, let's go to happy hour. Okay. And I'm at the bar having happy hour. And someone said, did you really put that in the book, Rev? Yes. I put it in the book that I became an alcoholic, that I was going to work, functioning, putting the mask on, leaving work, going to drink until I passed out. Somebody would drive me home, come home and argue with God. That was my routine for months. And when I finally got to the therapist, I said to her, sat in a chair as a reverend, I said, I need to make sure that I interject my faith in my therapy. I said, because there are some things you can answer, but there are other things that only God knows. And she was like, okay. And then as time kept going on, she says, listen, I don't care how much you pray, and no disrespect to your faith, you need to stop drinking because you're depressed and you're not going to get any better. And you need to take medication. And the drinking and the medication, she says, you're not going to make it.
Yeah. And how many folks, so many folks, like, don't realize that, because it's like, oh, I gotta go on. I gotta put this face on. I gotta put on this mask. I gotta be, because I was all that. And like you mentioned earlier, it doesn't matter where you are on the financial spectrum of life.
Doesn't matter. Your zip code does not exempt you from trauma. And it's trauma that happens in any shape or form, not just losing a child. It's anything, any type of traumatic, sudden interruption can be traumatic on an individual. And not everybody can say, oh, she's got PTSD. Oh, you got PTSD. Oh, you got the blue version. You got the Cadillac version. It has to be diagnosed by a doctor. And that's what we can do. We have to do that.
And be in support of each other.
Yes.
And also, like, listen, surrounding yourself with the right folks, because there are folks out here that are not identifying with their own
yes
trauma, and they have an opinion or a way.
Yes.
So how did you come, like, we gonna get to the lesson, to the groups that you started now.
Okay.
Talk a little bit about that. Not a little bit, but tell us about that.
So we have the book, and I don't know how to sit still. So I was having focus groups during the pandemic, and we had them go watch the production, all different ages, gender, nationalities, faith, watch the production, come back and ask me questions. And it didn't matter what the questions were. And I had an intern. and we recorded it and we listened to. Well, that's a good question. Some we talked about, some we recorded. And then I had a mental health professional, and she just did this she's doing this from the grace of her heart, Alice Forrester at Clifford Beers. She identified at least 8 mental health behaviors that she saw throughout the generations that were in the play. And we took those questions and we grouped them underneath the categories. Then Reverend Street said, "How can I help you?" And this is his background. He's a clinician. He's in medical. He's in trauma. He knows this. So he said, "How can I help you?" And he's been reading the book. Take this out. No, you can't say this. We can't clinically prove this anymore. So you don't want to go in that space, because what you're doing is peer-to-peer counseling, peer-to-peer, not counseling, peer-to-peer conversation, where you want people just to talk and then to find the next steps for them. Whether it's, let's take a look at my marriage, let's take a look at where I live, let's take a look at how I'm treating myself or I'm not treating myself. Let's take a look at, is this job abusive towards me? Am I abusive towards me? Take a look at everything. Let's have the conversation. And I also received an email from a Dr. Stephen Southwick. He watched the production, sent me an email and said, "Great production, loved watching your portrayal of trauma in families." He said, "But you missed it." And I said, "Who is this guy?" He said, "You missed resiliency." He says, "How can I help you talk about it?" And when I called Alice Forrester, I said, "Who's this Stephen Southwick?" And she's like, "Google him, Odell." And when I Googled him, I'm like, "Just tell me, who is this guy?" He's the best PTSD doctor in the country. He works at Yale University. He has had his entire life and career dedicated to working with veterans and their families to talk about PTSD and trauma. This man was counseling me, Ife, for a month, no charge. Reverend Streets, no charge. Alice Forrester, no charge. God sent me people who I didn't have a grant, didn't have a dollar. And even if I had a grant, I couldn't afford their consulting fee. Said, "How can I help you help people?" And the workshops are just like this, conversations. Let's talk about it. Let's talk. And I'm doing tonight, this week, I start my first trainer program. And I'm training people how to use the workbook and how to use the workbook, read the book, and have conversations in small groups to get people to start talking about it. Mount Airy Baptist Church had a group talk last Friday. Community Baptist is having their group talk on this coming Friday. Christian Tabernacle is on board to have theirs. Christ Chapel, which is now in Hamden, they're on board. CTVIP, their trainers are coming. Students from Quinnipiac are going to be in this class because there's going to be social workers. They're like, "Train us."
God.
And some people, and I have 2 people from out of state, they're like, "We want to be able to have these conversations, not just in our faith, but in our community." And people have, and Harvard Seminary has had me as a guest. Yale Divinity has had me as a guest, and to talk about this and the impact that when people put a mirror up to their face and to say, "That's me, that's been me. I'm not crazy." No, you're not crazy. It's biological.
In this process of training the trainer, especially when you say college students, like Quinnipiac students and divinity school and that, because you have, not that they don't, I don't know what the curriculum is, but not that they wouldn't, but to have someone that has experienced it and evolved, like is sharing and being transparent, it has to be helpful, because I really feel like, not really, but there are times when I feel like there are people coming from the outside
Yes.
into our community that say, "I want to make this is what's wrong, and I want to make this better."
Yes. Everyone wants to solve my problem, and you can't solve my problem. There's no quick fix. Pray more, Minister Cooper. You're not praying more. Where's your faith? Or there's a whole chapter called Ask Me Another Question, because that was my pushback. People, how are you feeling today? And I wasn't feeling good, Ife. My heart was heavy. None of the fact that I was also recovering from being drunk the night before and having depression. And be honest,
Yes.
and having depression, and the two did not work well together. And it hurt, and it was painful. I didn't understand the anger and the rage that I had for no reason. And people saw me looking like this, and I said, "No, I'm sick." No, what's the matter? I can't explain it, but I'm sick. And I just pushed back and said, "Ask me another question." So the problems that people of faith had, and some of us still have, is that how come I can't wake up and be grateful that God woke me up today, but still have a bad day? How come I have to say I'm blessed and highly favored and be okay? How come I have to say, "Oh, I'm just grateful to be alive," just to make you feel better?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't. Yes, I'm grateful to be alive. I'm grateful that God woke me up, but I'm still in pain. So for people of color, people in a faith, my suggestion, my recommendation, this book talk is we have to be able to allow people to be grateful and thankful that they're alive, but still be in a bad space.
And acknowledge
That it's
that,
okay.
because a lot of times when somebody says, "Oh, how you doing?" It's not space or time
No,
to tell you how I'm really doing.
because they don't want to know.
You really don't want to know. And especially in social situations. "Oh, girl, how you doing? How you doing? How you doing?"
You know,
You
they
really
don't.
you don't care.
It's a generic question that people asked, and they really didn't want my answer. And when I gave them my answer, they were shocked. Oh, really? Are you praying
Right.
more?
And it is like, "Okay, I'm not ready to handle this right now. Let me
No.
move on." Or
Yeah.
say, "Oh, don't ask her how she doing."
No. And I said, "Ask me another question." And they didn't have one. And that's when I said, "When you're ready for my answer, come back." And I'd hang up on folks. And that was true. Hung up. So the trainer is, because of the brain aneurysm, I can't do all of the training that's required. So in order to help people, I want to be able to train their leaders, be able to support their organization, whether it's in education, it's social work, it's school, community, faith-based, any center, place. We can train your leaders, and then you do the training. Your leaders do the training. I had a conversation with someone who wanted to roll this out. He says, "Will you do the training?" I said, "No, let me train your leaders," because there's a language that in that field that I can't learn.
And
And
there's a that builds more community in it.
yes. So I'm training the trainers. First week is this week. And then I'm working with another congregation. We just signed the contract this week. And I'm excited with First Cathedral. They're going to go through I'm teaching the 8-week. And then there's an 8-week session for the participants to go through. Every module is 90 minutes. And I'm teaching that, and I'm going to train their leaders how to deliver it. And I will be supporting them with consulting support so that they can launch it. And the trainers that are going through tonight, they go through it, and I give them consulting support to make sure they have any questions. Come back to me. Ask me a question. How can I help you? And if I need to co-teach with you, let me co-teach with you. If you need me, I'm here. But I can't carry this by myself. So I have to train others to take this message into our community and into their world and train others.
And it's the way you're sharing what you learned, a gift. It's actually, and it's more a more prosperous, and not in a monetary way, but it's more prosperous for everyone because so many people are silent about this. I want to ask too, when you're doing the training in churches, is it for the leaders of the church, members, who they determine?
Well, the pastors determine, but one of the things that I've said to them is that this is for me to build your leaders so they can support you. And they're like, oh, Pastor Andal said, I'm in. I'm in. I need the help. Reverend
Right.
King said, train my leaders. How can we get this? Because they know that they need it. First Cathedral said, we need it. How do we help people? Because if you don't deal with this, it's trickles down effect. So it's me training the leaders to support leadership. I've always been gifted at training leaders. So now I'm still training and equipping leaders to take this message and to deliver it. But I wanted to make sure that people don't whitewash it, water it down, and to say, oh, you just need to pray more sometimes. Trauma is not it. I mean, I have read Dr. Akbar's book. I have read The Body Keeps the Score, and all of the, Dr. Bellamy, not her book, but listening to podcasts and stories. And I've had to knock on doors, find people on LinkedIn and say, I'm Reverend Odell. I am new to mental health because my mama taught me better. And it's like, I'm not in this space. This is not the space you've ever known me to be in, but I'm in the mental health space, which we don't like mental health. So I'm in the space of emotional wellness. And I want to introduce myself to you and tell you who I am and what I'm doing. And my role is to disrupt the silence so that people, when they go to their doctor, Ife, they say, Doc, I'm not sleeping. And I'm waking up in the middle of the night, and it's been night after night, and I wake up and I'm irritable, I'm cranky, and I'm angry. And it's not just in my head. Something is going on. And we need to take a look at what's going on with me. So what do we do? Or I'm drinking too much, Doc, and I wasn't a drinker and I can't seem to get rid of this, or whatever it is. Learn that this workshop teaches us the terminology to apply to our everyday behaviors that we've been dismissing all our lives, and to put a name to it and to say, you need help.
I love the term emotional wellness, because mental health has evolved, because it is mind, body, soul.
Yes, it is emotional wellness. And when you talk to us about mental health, we don't like it. They're like, I'm not crazy.
Exactly.
Well, I meant it was something emotional wellness. So it tastes better. If it tastes better, if it, put a little sugar on the medicine to get you to take it. If that's what it takes, then that's what I'm doing. And this is our first week. So I'm excited about first week of training this week. Thank you for seeing me.
Congratulations. And so thanks for being here.
Thank you. So my website is launching. The program is launching. I'm excited.
Have any nonprofit organizations? You mentioned churches. Did you mention some nonprofit organizations?
Yes. CTVIP is a part of it. Two nonprofits are in Maryland. They're going to be online because it's virtual. And Quinnipiac, which is a school. And this is our first training. So I've had actually conversation with a principal at a school because he wanted to roll it out. He had his teaching staff. They was going to read it, talk about it, and how to turn it into a discussion for school, for teachers to deal with high school. And the principal has moved on to another career. So it's for that population as well. And I had a young man who was in the focus groups. He said, please get people to talk to us about it because they never ask us. So we are having them on our podcast. We're talking about it on the Interruption podcast. So we're under the same umbrella with Rev Kev,
Studios,
the Balboa Theater Studios. So yes, it's So
So
we're doing the
tell us when your
podcast.
podcast is. When
The
is your
podcast. It's on. We had a new show and it's aired Saturday. So go on, subscribe to the podcast. Interruption, disrupting the silence. And my daughter finally came on, and she told her story from a millennial. And she told me the hardest part for her was watching me do interruptions. And she said, I was mad at my mother because she's spending time with my brother and she's not spending time with me. Yes, he's dead, but I'm alive. What about me? She said, my mother was not paying attention to me. And that was the hardest thing
girl
to hear. She said it to me before. And then when she said it online, I'm like, okay, so do I not cry, or do I get the tissue and just try to, hold it? But it's real. It's real because parents, when you go through trauma, we disconnect with relationships. I was living with her, but she was invisible to me because I was in my trauma.
Your granddaughter.
Yes, and we talk about my granddaughter. So someone has asked me and I came to you to extract my granddaughter's story and put it into a book illustrated form to talk about how trauma impacted her at 4 years old and the impact it had on her going to school. And it did impact her, and we had to get on that very quickly. My daughter, she says it, she owns it now. She says, I was drinking and her job pulled her to the side and said, can't do this. What's going on? But I'm glad we've all had that level of support of people that pulled us up and to say, you can't do this. I see where you're headed, and not turned their backs on us. And there are some people out there, Ife, where we're turning our back on because we're telling them to pray more, or they're still sitting in silence, and we can't do it anymore.
And I want to encourage folks who see this and who will get the book, not only get the book, but go to your podcast. And if you're in one of those churches, get a session in.
Send your leaders.
Send your leaders.
And it's not just churches. It's like there are educators, there are community centers that this is a good fit for. Chief Higgins and I at Yale University, he's interested, and I'm going, what this looks like going down the road. So I respect people wanting to say, how do we recognize this in our community and have different conversations versus just dismissing them? Because I went through failed relationships, went through loss of jobs, went through friends who, she's still crying? I don't, really? Come on, fix yourself up, do something. And
keep it moving.
And one of the things I told my pastor is, I regret, I blame me, nobody else, that I let my faith, my culture, call my son's service a celebration of life versus mourning his death. I did not cry at his funeral because I was told to be strong. It's okay. He's in a much better place. That's what we say. And I've said it to people. But Reverend, we know all the words. I've said it, in a much better place. God needed another angel, all of that. But Ife, I dismissed every one of them. And I now looked at the pew that I sat in that I didn't cry. And I was at church the other day and yesterday. And I think I'm just going to sit there and just cry.
Yes.
Because he deserves it. And we deserve to honor losing a loved one. And I told my daughter, when the doctors told her that I was going to die, and to stop praying for me. Because of the brain aneurysm. They said, stop praying for her. But I didn't know he told her that. They was going to tell me you're not going to die. They said, stop praying for her. She's not going to make it. I told her before I went into surgery, pay my bills and go to work, because we had bills to pay. And we had to have that conversation. And she said that hurt her. And one of the things I said to her, now we had to have that conversation. I said, sweetheart, now, I said, anything happens to me, I said, I don't know if I can curse on your podcast. I said
all the time, Kevin.
Okay. I said, don't pay a damn bill. Take the money, take care of my service, and use the money to get yourself some help. But you better cry at my service because of our relationship. Don't let no one tell me that you're not supposed to cry. And how dare me as a reverend tell people not to cry. It's going to be okay. Yes, it's eventually going to be okay, but not when I'm looking at a casket or his ashes at 24, at 17, or car accident or suicide. No, we as people of color, we as ministers have to think differently. And we as deacons, people in our faith, we have to be conscious of what we say to people and when we say it. Because much better place, don't cry, is in. And I've heard my pastor from the pulpit say, he tells his wife, when I die, you better cry. So if she can cry, why can't somebody else sitting down there? Let us cry. And we have to dismiss the myth and stigmas and disrupting the silence. And this is what I'm doing. And not everybody's going to agree with me, but that's okay. But I have impacted some, and some who tasted the medicine have said they've changed. Some people have said, I've gone to counseling now. Mm-hmm. Some people have said, I will no longer say that to people.
And that's just what I was thinking, because I've lately, in several, over the past months or so, when I've attended funerals, I've been thinking, I don't know what to say to anyone, only because when my mother passed, it was so many people saying those cliche things.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it was building, like, I cared for like that care, and then afterwards not having to do that, but that becoming a routine of care for an elder, and then having them pass is like, I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to hear it. So for me to say that to other people, like, it just made me think about what do I say, or what I just give a hug.
That's it.
And be like,
just be present.
And then revisit folks a week or two after the funeral repass, because
that's when we need it. You don't have to, I've learned you don't have to have the words to say, just be present. You know, my pastor has trained us well, has educated us well. Seminary school has educated me well, but none of that, Ife, helped me. I mean, not true. It helped me. My faith helped me, but the cliches did not. And I had to learn God differently for myself. So the production is online, and I still pitch that I would love for this to still be on stage and to be able to show Interruptions on stage. I just need a director. So pitch, watch it. If you want to direct Interruptions, please contact me. And I would love to be able to tell my granddaughter's story on a play, so other kids can see and parents can hear and see what we do that we're not aware of that is traumatizing.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the time. It was lovely to talk to you.
Thank you for having me.
And everyone, get the book. Oops, where am I? Get the book, Interruptions, Disrupting the Silence. Get the podcast, subscribe to the podcast.
Yes.
Look at the play. I'm IfeMichelle Gardin, LITFest podcast, signing out. And thank you so much, Odell.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.